On day 2 of Donald Trump's impeachment trial, Democrats are presenting their case, arguing that the former president inflamed and incited the Capitol riots. The impeachment managers aim to show that Trump tried to fabricate an election when throws relentless and escalating campaigns. They stress that the former president ignored adverse court rulings, pressure and threatened elections officials, attacked senators and members of the Congress, pressured the Justice Department, and even bullied his own vice president. House impeachment manager and Republican Ted Lieu focused on Trump's pressure on Mike Pence to challenge the election results, stressing he was fiercely grasping for a straw to retain the power of the president. In that act, the operation that saw him turn on his own vice president, pressuring Pence to violate his constitutional oath.
In the first crucial hours of this violent attack, he did nothing to stop it, nothing to help us. By all accounts, from the people that were around him, he was delighted. And here's the last thing Donald Trump said that day. And you might remember this from my motions presentation earlier in the week. At 6 p.m. on January 6th, after all the destruction that you just saw, the Capitol Police and the National Guard fighting to secure this building, here's what Donald Trump tweeted. "These are the things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long. Go home with love and in peace. Remember this day forever."
The National Electoral Council of Ecuador continues the audit to the vote count following the general elections held on February 7. With 90.82% of the ballots audited, Andrés Arauz is consolidated as the winner of the first round of the presidential election with more than 32% of the vote. Meanwhile, neck and neck in second place are Yacu Perez of Pachacutic Indigenous Party and Guillermo Lasso of the Creating Opportunities Party, both of whom have made allegations of electoral fraud. Perez has so far secured 19% of the votes, while Lasso is just ahead of him with 19.63% after having trailed behind until now. The population is still waiting for the Electoral Council to make the full result official in order to find out which of the two candidates will face Andrés Arauz in the second round. President of Argentina, Alberto Fernández, is meeting this Wednesday with the Agricultural Liaison Board to discuss the sector production and the measures announced by the executive for rural areas. The meeting held at the Presidential Palace will see Fernández and his aides evaluate together with the Liaison Board the strategies to simulate food production in the country and reduce its cost. During the meeting, representatives of the agricultural sector will express their concern about the President's decisions to increase taxes on export of primacy products. Fernández has explained that the measures is due to the increase in the domestic demand for products such as red meat. Hundreds of women took to the street of the Argentinian city of Rojas on Wednesday to protest the murder of an 18-year-old woman by her partner in a country that continues to battle high rates of feminicide. Ursula Bajillo, aged just 19, was stabbed to death by her former partner, a policeman, Matias Ezequiel Martinez, against whom she had previously filed 18 complaints for gender violence. Since 2015, Argentina has been the epicenter of the massive street demonstrations under the slogan, "Not one less," which placed the issue of gender-based violence on the public agenda.
What I need is for him to live, so that he can pay his sentence with life and not with death, because it would be much easier for him to die as my daughter died, but he would not pay this in jail. And what we want as parents is, as minimum, life imprisonment for him. And I know that God's going to listen to us and the professionals we have too. The person who killed my daughter had a psychological, not a psychiatric certificate. The person who signed it was a psychologist. not a psychiatrist. He was not medical.
This Wednesday, residents of the Colombian city of Buenaventura made a human change to demand the end of the violence in the country. Citizens gathered on the Bolivar Avenue where they held hands to form a human chain, stretching 21 kilometers and advocate for the peace in the region and through the country. The demonstration was supported by the Catholic Church, which was represented by Bishop Ruben Darío Jaramillo Montoya. Activists also demand better living conditions and the strengthening of the public health and education systems. Bolivia inaugurated the second phase of the largest solar power plants this Wednesday, financed mainly by France as part of the commitments made at the 2015 Climate Summit. As part of this phase, the plant in western Bolivia was inaugurated in September 2019. The project required investment of about $100 million, of which 70% was provided by the French Development Agency. Another 10% was financed by Europe's Latin American Investment Facility, and the remaining 20% by Bolivia's central bank. The facility aims to produce clean energy to eliminate the use of fossil fuels to supply the country's power grid. Bolivia primarily generates electricity from hydroelectric plants. Civil society organizations in Haiti marched on Wednesday to demand President Juvenal Moïse step down from office. The mobilization was organized by the National Union of Workers of Haiti, as well as the student movement and other organizations. The march was widely supported by the population and had as its main objective to reach the metropolitan area of the city of Port-au-Prince to denounce government corruption, authoritarianism, and persecution by Moïse's administration. We will take a short break. Don't forget to follow us in teleSUR English and Pérez Moya teleSUR. We are in Twitter like this. Join us again after this. Welcome back. The Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, Alicia Bárcena, has warned that the coronavirus pandemic will set back female labor force participation in Latin America by a decade.
These patriarchal cultural patterns are expressed in the persistence and worsening of violence, gender violence, feminicides that are increasing and that we've called the pandemic in the shadows, because it is a pandemic that is happening in the shadows and in silence, but that is affecting women and girls.
According to the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, one of the labor resources most affected by the COVID-19 was paid domestic work. The level of employment in this area during the second quarter of 2020 fell by 24% in Brazil, 46% in Chile, 44% in Colombia, and 45% in Costa Rica.
If the measures that governments are taking do not reach women, we will have 118 million women in poverty, 23 million more than in 2019. And what does this mean? It means a 10-year setback. 10 years of setback, and this is really a lost decade in women's participation in the labour market. Women are on the front line of the response to the pandemic, accounting for 73.2% of the total number of people employed in the health sector, as we also saw in the education sector, above 70%.
The Brazilian Senate on Wednesday approved a bill that prohibits the deactivation of field hospitals for patients with COVID-19 until vaccination has progressed in the municipalities where they are installed. The text, which will go now to the chambers of deputies, established that field hospitals may only be dismantled by regional or municipal governments when more than 70% of their inhabitants are immunized against the novel coronavirus or when sufficient beds are available in their normal health networks. Last year, field hospitals play an important role in treating less severe cases of COVID-19, helping to relieve pressure on the public health systems of many of the country's regional capitals and worst hit areas such as Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and Belo Horizonte. Speaking during a congressional hearing this Wednesday, Costa Rica President Carlos Alvarado dismissed allegations regarding the violation of citizens' personal data. Offering testimony before a legislative commission investigating a data collection unit that Arauz, suspicious of having accessed private information from the general public, the president defended the creation of the Presidential Unit for Data Analysis as a method to formulate public policies that he claimed were based on science and data. The creation of the unit unleashed political controversy in 2020, when critics argued it will have access to confidential information. The decree creating it was repealed a few days later, but the suspicion of the access to private information led to the prosecutor's office reading a presidency on February 29th, an operation in which 2 cell phones and a laptop were seized from President Alvarado. Director of Pan American Health Organization, Carissa Etienne, has noted that the agency is confident of the efficacy of the vaccines available to address the COVID-19 pandemic and that there is evidence that they are also effective against the new variants of the virus.
Based on the evidence that we have now on the variants of concern, we are confident that our growing portfolio of COVID-19 vaccines remains useful and will guide us through the end of this pandemic. We have at our hands a whole generation of effective vaccines to prevent infection and especially severe disease. Down the line, we may need to adapt our strategies, but we will continue to rely on these vaccines. The challenge now remains to ensure that these vaccines are distributed quickly and fairly across our region, starting with those who need them most.
South Africa's health minister has announced that the planned coronavirus vaccination campaign will now be launched with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine after the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine's effectiveness against new strains of the coronavirus was brought into questions.
Given the outcomes of the efficacy studies, the Department of Health will continue its planned phase 1 vaccination, targeting the health workers using the Johnson & Johnson vaccine instead of the AstraZeneca vaccine. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine has been proven effective against the 501YV2 variant, and the necessary approval processes for use in South Africa are underway.
As South Africa works to begin its mass vaccination campaigns, the country has started to see a decline in coronavirus cases, according to data released late Tuesday by Health Minister. The minister said the country recorded a lower positivity rate of 6% compared to the past 2 months, when the rate was 10% or above. He also noted that the numbers of COVID recoveries now stand over 1.3 million, representing a recovery rate of 92%. Ghana's parliament closed its doors on Tuesday for at least 3 weeks after more than 100 cases of COVID-19 were discovered among MPs and staff. Parliament Speaker Salvan Bangbin announced the decision after consultation with political leaders to allow disinfection and sanitation of the premises. At least 17 parliamentarians and 151 staff members have tested positive for the novel coronavirus in recent days. Last Thursday, the discovery of the first cases had already forced legislators to reduce their meetings to 2 sections per week. The West African country has officially confirmed a total of just over 73,000 cases of COVID-19, including 482 deaths. Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi announced on Twitter this Wednesday that he has held a telephone call with his Canadian counterpart regarding supplies of COVID-19 vaccines. The news came just days after the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, faced questions over delays in producing COVID vaccines. Modi said he has assured the Canadian Prime Minister that India will do its best to facilitate vaccine supplies to the country. We have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us.
La geopolítica latinoamericana expuesta a través de los diarios. Cada día observa lo que la prensa tiene que decir desde Enclave Mediática. Lunes a viernes. Solo por teleSUR.
Welcome back. U.S. President Joe Biden offered new sanctions on Myanmar on Wednesday following the military takeover and ousting of its civilian government.
As you know, the assault on Burma's transition to democracy remains an issue of deep bipartisan concern. We've consulted at length, for example, with Senator McConnell, who has had a very keen interest in this, and his team, and we welcome their helpful insights. We've also been in close contact with our allies and partners around the world, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region, driving vigorous diplomatic outreach to help coordinate an international response to what happened. As protests grow, violence against those asserting their democratic rights is unacceptable, and we're going to keep calling it out. The people of Burma are making their voices heard, and the world is watching. We'll be ready to impose additional measures, and we'll continue to work with our international partners to urge other nations to join us in these efforts.
U.S. President Joe Biden announced the formation of a Special Defense Department task force on China this Wednesday and ordered an immediate review on the military's strategic approach to what he termed the challenge from Beijing.
On a new DoD-wide China task force that Secretary Austin is standing up to look at our strategy and operational concepts, technology and force posture, and so much more. The task force will work quickly, drawing on civilian and military experts across the department to provide, within the next few months, recommendations to Senator Austin on key priorities and decision points so that we can chart a strong path forward on China-related matters.
This Wednesday, China's proof Tianwen-1 successfully entered the orbit around Mars. Tianwen-1's mission is to land a rover and collect data on underground water and possible signs of ancient life. The probe arrived after a nearly 7 months voyage from Earth. The orbiter-rover combination became the second spacecraft in 2 days to reach the red planet, after an orbiter from the United Arab Emirates led the day on Tuesday. Next week, the U.S. will try to land its Perseverance rover on the Martian surface. The United Nations has strongly condemned an attack in Mali on Wednesday, in which 28 peacekeepers from Togo were wounded.
We'll start off with an update from Mali, where, as you know, early this morning, 28 peacekeepers from Togo were wounded when their temporary base located in Kerena near Douentza in north-central Mali was targeted by what our UN colleagues on the ground describe as a complex attack. We, of course, strongly condemn the attack. The UN mission on the ground has taken all necessary measures to ensure that the injured receive prompt and appropriate treatment. We, of course, wish them all a speedy and full recovery.
Ethiopian president arrived in Burundi for a two-day visit on Tuesday, where she was received by her Burundian counterpart, Evariste Ndayishimiye. The visit seeks to strengthen bilateral relations between the two African nations. President Sewed arrived international airport and was received by Ndayishimiye together with other senior government officials, including the Burundian Foreign Affairs Minister Albert Shingiro.
Her Excellency, Ms. Sahle-Work Sweetie, commended the work of economic development and consolidation of democracy undertaken with determination and conviction by His Excellency President Evariste Ndayishimiye. She commended Burundi's contribution to various peacekeeping missions, particularly in Somalia and the Central African Republic. His Excellency Evariste Ndayishimiye appreciated Ethiopia's substantial participation in peacekeeping missions in Africa, particularly in Somalia.
The conflict between wildlife and humans is growing in Kenya and Bosley National Park, despite the precautions taken by placing electrifying fence to prevent wildlife from entering areas that are increasingly being used for commercial agriculture. Oscar Epelde brings us more details.
Of the adult generation here, few were able to study. Like this child, they tended to their herds.
And Joseph, do you want to go to school?
What is his ambition? Simply to get wealthy.
They decided to divide land into divisions so that everybody to part his part of land. We want everybody to benefit.
The nearly 5,000 members of the group ranch felt let down by their 3 representatives. The crops produced in Namelog can now be expanded on private farms, although they claim they have also demarcated protected areas to benefit from a new common management program by tourism and conservation organizations and their donors, who rent fragile land, paying for the passage of animals, and building these electrified fences to protect communities from wildlife and vice versa.
We have people with cows, we have people without cows, and they sell that land because of poverty. They send children to school. They want also to pay the land, because once we said we divide the land, you have to pay as a member.
We are pastoralism, so when there's no rain here, we need to move. When the land you should be divided, maybe people will sell cows because everybody say you don't come to my small land. I don't want to see your cows here. In future life coming, there's no migration of cows. People sell cows. You can remain with 2 cows only for milking.
In Kimana, many plots are leased to produce tomatoes or onions. Curious about the smell, elephants visit them at night.
He destroyed this area.
The scouts of the Big Life Foundation try to prevent conflict. Kamba tenants have paid several hundred thousands to the Maasai Tajiri, or ranch owners. Ngay lights a fire to scare off the elephant as he expands his crop.
I want to expand. That's why I'm burning grass to increase the onion. Even if the elephant comes and destroys it, I have to work the land again.
The scouts are local Maasai and support the communities by guarding the wildlife corridor, which at this entrance to the Kimana sanctuary is only 200 meters wide. They keep the elephants away from the fence to reduce conflict. They also rent out plots of land with international donations. There is no poaching, no one kills elephants here, but the habitat in which they have lived with the herders is narrowing.
We are looking after our fence to be good, so that can look after the animals to pass the corridor.
The elephant that has just been expelled from the area later smashed the fence.
He cheated us and then came back to us and then to enter the chambers.
The electric shock is supposed to have deterred it from going through the fence.
The ecosystem management plan designates it for wildlife and livestock use only. But actually we're seeing a lot of agricultural development taking place within it. So, unless it's managed correctly, we'll see Amboseli being strangled. Amboseli requires wildlife to move in and out. It's part of the ecosystem. The ecosystem today is a lot smaller than it was 50 years ago, 100 years ago. it was probably once about 3 million acres. Today, what you could truly say the ecosystem where animals have passage and can move is maybe 1.5 million.
An ecosystem management plan and its proper implementation, the other condition for preservation.
Desde Amboseli, Oscar Repelde para teleSUR.
We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for Telesur English. I am Janet Perez Moya. Thank you for watching.
A review of the world news that investigates, incites analysis and induces criticism, because every event has a context.